your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Victor Brennan had built his life on three principles: loyalty, family, and never showing weakness. At 32, he owned a successful security consulting firm that specialized in high-end residential and corporate protection systems. His reputation in the industry was ironclad, methodical, thorough, and utterly reliable. What few people knew was that Victor's expertise extended far beyond security cameras and alarm systems. His military background in intelligence had taught him how to read people, how to gather information, and most importantly, how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. His wife, Brooke, had been his college sweetheart. She was 28, blonde, and possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads wherever she went. She'd grown up in a wealthy family, but had fallen on harder times after her father's business failed. When she married Victor, she thought she was getting security and status. What she got instead was a man who expected complete loyalty and gave the same in return. Their son Tyler was everything to Victor. At 8 years old, the boy had his father's dark hair and serious eyes, but his mother's easy smile. Victor had been planning Tyler's future since the day he was born. The best schools, sports teams, eventually taking over the family business. Tyler was Victor's legacy, his proof that the Brennan name meant something. The first crack in Victor's perfect world came on a Tuesday evening in October. He'd returned early from a business trip to San Diego, planning to surprise his family. Instead, he found his house empty except for the nanny, Mrs. Rodriguez, who looked uncomfortable when she saw him. "Where are Brooke and Tyler?" Victor asked, setting down his briefcase. Mrs. Brennan said she was taking Tyler to his friend's house for a sleepover. The older woman replied, not quite meeting his eyes. "But that was yesterday afternoon. She hasn't been back since." Victor's training kicked in immediately. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no texts. He called Brooke's cell, straight to voicemail. A cold sensation settled in his stomach as he began to piece together small things he'd dismissed over the past few months. Brooke's sudden interest in yoga classes that seemed to run late. Her new friends he'd never met. The way she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner. He spent the next 6 hours methodically tracking his family. Security cameras from nearby businesses. Credit card transactions. Cell phone pings. By 2 a.m., he had his answer. Brooke and Tyler were at the Grandview Resort, an expensive mountain retreat 2 hours away. And they weren't alone. Victor arrived at the Grandview Resort as the sun was rising. He'd changed into casual clothes and brought a camera with a telephoto lens, tools of his trade that he'd never imagined using on his own family. The resort was exclusive, the kind of place that catered to wealthy clients who valued privacy above all else. It took him 3 hours of careful surveillance to spot them. Brooke was walking hand in hand with a man Victor didn't recognize, tall, athletic, with the kind of confident swagger that came from never facing real consequences. Tyler was trailing behind them, looking small and confused. Victor's blood turned to ice as he watched the man ruffle his son's hair with casual familiarity. This wasn't a recent development. The way they moved together, the comfortable intimacy between Brooke and her lover, the way Tyler seemed to know the man. This had been going on for months. Through his telephoto lens, Victor captured every moment. The intimate touches when they thought no one was looking. The way Brooke laughed at things the man said. The moment when Tyler tried to hold his mother's hand, and she brushed him off to focus on her companion. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator contacts. Information he'd requested about resort registrations. The name made his jaw clench. Brett Morrison, 34, real estate developer from Phoenix. Married, 2 children of his own. As Victor watched, Brett's phone rang. He answered it, and even from a distance, Victor could see the conversation turning heated. Brett walked away from Brooke and Tyler, gesturing angrily as he spoke. When he returned, his face was dark with anger. "We need to go," Victor heard Brett say as he got close enough to eavesdrop. "Now." "But you said we had until Sunday." "Plans changed. My wife found out about the credit card charges." Brett grabbed their bags roughly. "This little fantasy is over." Victor watched his wife's face crumble. What about Tyler and me? What about what you promised? Brett's laugh was cruel. What about them? You think I'm going to blow up my real life for some side piece? And her kid? Get real, Brooke. The next few minutes shattered Victor's world completely. He watched as Brett Morrison walked away, leaving Brooke and Tyler standing in the resort parking lot. He saw his wife collapse onto a bench, sobbing. And then he saw the moment that would haunt him forever. Brooke looked at Tyler, their 8-year-old son who was asking why Mommy was crying, and Victor saw something die in her eyes. She grabbed Tyler's arm roughly and started walking toward the woods that bordered the resort. Victor followed at a distance, his heart hammering as he realized what was happening. Brooke was walking deeper into the mountain trails, pulling Tyler along despite his protest that he was tired and scared. The October air was getting colder as evening approached, and Tyler was only wearing a light jacket. Mommy, where are we going? Tyler's voice carried on the mountain air. I want to go home. Shut up, Brooke snapped, and Victor saw his son flinch. Just shut up and walk. They reached a small clearing about 2 miles from the resort. Brooke stopped abruptly and knelt down to Tyler's level. Even from his hidden position, Victor could see she was crying. Tyler, listen to me, Brooke said, her voice shaking. Mommy has to go away for a while. You need to stay here and wait for help to come. I don't want you to go away, Tyler sobbed. Please don't leave me here, Mommy. Brooke's face hardened. You don't understand. Brett doesn't want you around. He says you remind him too much of your father, and I can't choose you over him. I love him. Victor's hands clenched into fists as he listened to his wife explain to their 8-year-old son why she was abandoning him in the mountains. She told Tyler to stay in the clearing, that someone would find him eventually. She gave him a granola bar from her purse and walked away, never looking back despite Tyler's screams. Victor waited until Brooke was completely gone before approaching his son. Tyler was curled up against a fallen log, crying and calling for his mother. When he saw his father emerge from the woods, his relief was overwhelming. Daddy, you came. Mommy said she had to leave, but you came. Victor knelt down and pulled his son into his arms, feeling the boy's small body shaking with cold and fear. In that moment, something fundamental changed inside Victor Brennan. The capacity for forgiveness, for understanding, for giving people second chances, it all died in that mountain clearing. I'm here, Tyler, he whispered into his son's hair. Daddy's here, and I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again. As he carried Tyler back towards civilization, Victor was already planning. He called 911 from the trailhead, reporting that he'd found an abandoned child in the mountains. When the police arrived, he told them exactly what had happened, how he'd followed his wife and watched her abandon their son. He had the photos, the recordings, the evidence. By midnight, there was a warrant out for Brooke's arrest for child endangerment and abandonment. But Brooke Brennan had vanished, along with Brett Morrison. The police investigation revealed that Brett had liquidated several assets quickly and disappeared, likely leaving the country. As Victor held his sleeping son in the hospital that night, watching doctors check for hypothermia and dehydration, he made a vow. When Brooke and Brett eventually surfaced, and they would, he would be ready. He would make them pay for what they'd done to Tyler in ways they couldn't even imagine. The old Victor might have forgiven. The new Victor only knew how to plan revenge. 10 years had transformed Victor from a successful businessman into something much more dangerous. He'd sold his security consulting firm for 8 figures and invested the money in ways that gave him influence and reach far beyond what most people could imagine. Shell companies, private investigators, connections in law enforcement, and perhaps most importantly, a network of contacts who specialized in making problems disappear. Tyler was now 18, a senior in high school, with a full scholarship to Stanford waiting for him in the fall. The abandoned 8-year-old had grown into a young man who was brilliant, driven, and completely devoted to his father. They'd never spoken much about that night in the mountains, but Victor could see the steel in his son's eyes. Tyler had inherited his father's capacity for cold calculation. Dad, Tyler said one evening as they reviewed college preparation materials in Victor's study, I've been thinking about what I want to major in. Business, I hope. The family companies will need. Criminal justice. Tyler interrupted quietly. Maybe law enforcement or law school. Victor looked up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing. His son's face was serious, mature beyond his years. Any particular reason? Tyler was quiet for a long moment. I remember more than you think I do. About that night. About her. The way he said her instead of mom spoke volumes. I want to understand how the system works. How to make sure people like her face consequences. Victor felt a surge of pride. Tyler wasn't broken by what had happened. He was forged by it, just like his father. That pride was still warming Victor's chest 3 days later when his phone rang at 11:47 p.m. The number was blocked, but Victor's security systems had already traced it to a burner phone purchased in Las Vegas 6 hours earlier. Victor Brennan. His voice was calm, giving nothing away. It's me. Brooke's voice was older, rougher, but unmistakably hers. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you about Tyler. Victor's grip tightened on the phone. There's nothing to discuss. Please. I know I made mistakes, but he's my son too. I have rights. You forfeited your rights when you abandoned him in the mountains to freeze. Victor's voice was deadly quiet. The statute of limitations on child endangerment hasn't run out, Brooke. Neither has the warrant. That was a long time ago. I was confused. I was in a bad place. Brett manipulated me. Brett Morrison is dead. Victor's words hit like a sledgehammer. Car accident in Mexico 3 years ago. Died drunk and alone, which is exactly what he deserved. The silence on the other end told Victor everything he needed to know. Brooke hadn't known. She'd probably been waiting for Brett to send for her this whole time, never realizing that her lover had moved on and ultimately paid the price for his choices. I want to see Tyler, Brooke said finally, her voice cracking. I'm his mother. I have legal rights. You have nothing, Victor said. But if you want to try to exercise those non-existent rights, you're welcome to come home and face the music. I'm sure the district attorney would love to finally close that old case. After hanging up, Victor sat in his study for a long time, thinking. Brooke was back, which meant she was desperate. Desperate people made mistakes. And Victor had spent 10 years preparing for this exact moment. He opened his laptop and began making calls. Brooke arrived in town 6 weeks later, and Victor knew the moment she crossed the county line. His network of contacts included people in positions that provided early warning systems for exactly this kind of situation. She was driving a 10-year-old Honda with Nevada plates, staying at the Motel 6 on the outskirts of town, and had exactly $847 in her checking account. 10 years had not been kind to her. The photos his investigator provided showed a woman who'd aged far beyond her years. The blonde hair was now bottle-bleached and showing gray roots. The designer clothes had been replaced by thrift store finds. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd made terrible choices and spent a decade paying for them. Victor learned everything about Brooke's lost decade within 48 hours of her arrival. After abandoning Tyler, she'd followed Brett to Mexico, where they'd lived off his dwindling savings while he drank himself into increasingly violent rages. When the money ran out, Brett started beating her. When she tried to leave, he threatened to turn her in to American authorities for child abandonment. After Brett's death, Brooke had bounced around the American Southwest, working dead-end jobs and getting involved with increasingly worse men. She'd been arrested twice for drug possession, once for shoplifting, and had spent 6 months in a Nevada County jail. Her last boyfriend had been a meth dealer who'd put her in the hospital before disappearing with what little money she'd managed to save. Now she was back, and she wanted her son. The confrontation Victor had been preparing for came on a Tuesday afternoon. Tyler was at school when Brooke showed up at their house, the same house she'd once lived in, now completely remodeled and bearing no trace of her presence. Victor answered the door as if he'd been expecting her. Hello, Brooke. She looked older than her years, nervous, but there was still a hint of the manipulative charm she'd once wielded so effectively. Victor, you look good. Success suits you. What do you want? I want to see my son. I want to be part of his life again. She straightened her shoulders, trying to project confidence she clearly didn't feel. I've changed. I've grown up. I know I made mistakes, but Tyler needs his mother. Victor stepped aside, and gestured for her to come in. Brooke hesitated. She clearly hadn't expected this, but followed him into the living room. "Tell me," Victor said, settling into his chair with the casual confidence of a man completely in control. "What exactly do you think Tyler needs from his mother?" "Love. Support. A woman's perspective as he grows into a man." Brooke's voice grew stronger as she spoke, as if she was convincing herself as much as him. "I know I wasn't there for his childhood, but I can be there for the important parts. Graduation, college, when he gets married." "Tyler graduated valedictorian 3 months ago," Victor interrupted. "He's heading to Stanford in the fall with a full scholarship. He's already got a girlfriend, a brilliant young woman named Emma, whose father happens to be a federal judge. Tyler doesn't need anything from you, Brooke. He never has." Brooke's composure cracked. "You can't keep me from him forever. I have rights." "Do you?" Victor pulled out his phone and showed her a document on the screen. "Because this court order says otherwise. It seems that abandoning a child in the wilderness creates certain legal complications for parental rights." The document was real. Victor had spent considerable resources making sure all the legal groundwork was laid years ago. But he wasn't done. "However," he continued, "I'm not unreasonable. Tyler is 18 now, legally an adult. If he wants to see you, that's his choice to make." As if summoned, the front door opened and Tyler walked in from school. He stopped dead when he saw Brooke, and Victor watched his son's face carefully. There was no recognition, no emotion, just cold assessment. "Tyler," Brooke breathed, taking a step toward him. "Oh my God, look how tall you are. You're so handsome. You look just like my father," Tyler finished, his voice flat. "I know who you are." Brooke's eyes filled with tears. "I know I haven't been there, but I want to make up for lost time. I want to be your mother again." Tyler looked at her for a long moment, then turned to Victor. "Dad, is this the woman who left me in the mountains to die so she could run away with her boyfriend?" The words hit Brooke like physical blows. "It wasn't like that. I was young. I was confused." "You were 28, Tyler said, his voice still completely emotionless. "That's not young. That's old enough to know that you don't abandon children in the wilderness." He looked back at Brooke. "I remember you. I remember begging you not to leave me. I remember you telling me that your boyfriend was more important than I was." Brooke collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was sick. You were selfish," Tyler said. "And now you're back because you need something. Money, probably. Or maybe just somewhere to live because your life fell apart." He looked at Victor. "Dad, I'm going to my room. I have homework." As Tyler walked upstairs, Brooke turned to Victor with desperate eyes. "Please, I know I don't deserve it, but please give me a chance to make this right." Victor smiled, and Brooke shivered at the expression. "Oh, I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve," he said softly. "The question is whether you're smart enough to understand what that means." Victor's revenge began the next morning with a phone call to Brooke's motel room. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said when she answered. "Tyler's leaving for college in a few months. Maybe it would be good for him to have some kind of closure before he goes." Brooke's voice was eager, desperate. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever you think is best. I'm going to make you an offer, Brooke. It's generous, and it's the only one you're going to get." Victor's tone was businesslike. "I'll give you $50,000 and help you get back on your feet. In exchange, you sign documents formally surrendering any parental claims to Tyler and agree to leave town permanently." 50,000? Brooke's voice was breathless. That's very generous." "It is, but there are conditions. You stay in town for exactly 2 weeks. During that time, you'll have supervised visits with Tyler, if he chooses to see you. You'll also undergo a complete psychological evaluation to determine your fitness as a parent. If you pass both tests, you get the money and a clean slate to start over somewhere else." It was perfect bait. $50,000 was more money than Brooke had seen in years, and the psychological evaluation sounded reasonable enough. What she didn't know was that Victor had spent months setting up this exact scenario. The psychologist Victor recommended was Dr. Angela Hayes, a legitimate professional who specialized in family reunification cases. She had no idea that Victor had arranged for her to receive detailed information about Brooke's mental health history, including medical records that painted a picture of severe personality disorders and addiction issues. The supervised visits were to be held at a neutral location, a family counseling center that Victor had chosen specifically because it was equipped with the most advanced recording technology available. Every word, every gesture, every interaction would be captured in high definition. Brooke agreed to everything. The first visit was a disaster. Tyler showed up exactly on time, dressed in his school clothes, carrying a book. He sat across from Brooke in the counseling room and waited. "I don't really know where to start," Brooke said, wringing her hands. "I guess. How is school today?" "Fine. What classes are you taking?" "Advanced placement courses. I'm preparing for Stanford." Brooke tried for an hour to connect with her son, asking about his interests, his friends, his plans for the future. Tyler answered every question with minimal responses, never volunteering information, never asking questions of his own. He was polite but distant, exactly what Victor had taught him to be. "Tyler, I know you're angry with me," Brooke finally said, tears streaming down her face. "But I was sick back then. I wasn't thinking clearly. The man I was with, he manipulated me. He made me believe." "You made a choice," Tyler interrupted. "You chose him over me. You left me alone in the mountains because you thought I was an inconvenience." He closed his book and stood up. "I think we're done here." After Tyler left, Brooke broke down completely. The counselor, Dr. Martinez, tried to be supportive, but her notes reflected serious concerns about Brooke's emotional stability and her apparent inability to take responsibility for her actions. The psychological evaluation was even worse. Dr. Hayes was thorough and professional, but the assessment she was working with was devastating. Brooke's medical records showed a history of addiction, borderline personality disorder, and what appeared to be narcissistic tendencies. When Dr. Hayes asked about the abandonment incident, Brooke's responses were textbook examples of deflection and blame shifting. "I was the victim in that situation," Brooke insisted. "Brett manipulated me. He was controlling and abusive. I wasn't thinking clearly." "But you made the decision to leave Tyler alone in the mountains," Dr. Hayes said gently. "Can you help me understand your thought process at that moment?" "I knew someone would find him. I left him somewhere safe. I wasn't thinking about the consequences because I was in an abusive relationship." Dr. Hayes made extensive notes. In her professional opinion, Brooke showed no genuine remorse for her actions and appeared to lack the emotional capacity for healthy parenting. By the end of the first week, Victor had everything he needed, but he wasn't done yet. The second week was when things got interesting. On Monday of the second week, Brooke received a call that changed everything. "Miss Morrison?" The voice on the phone was official, professional. "This is Detective Jennifer Walsh with the County District Attorney's Office. We need to speak with you about some new information regarding the Tyler Brennan abandonment case." Brooke's blood turned to ice. I don't understand. That case is old. New evidence has come to light. We'd like you to come in voluntarily for questioning. If you prefer, you can bring an attorney." When Brooke called Victor in a panic, he was sympathetic and helpful. "I'm sure it's just a formality," he told her. "The detective probably wants to close the case officially, but you should definitely get a lawyer. I know someone good, Harrison Wells. He specializes in family law and criminal defense." What Brooke didn't know was that Harrison Wells was Victor's college roommate and oldest friend. He was also a legitimately excellent attorney who would provide competent representation while keeping Victor informed of every development. The meeting with Detective Walsh was illuminating. The detective was real, the case was real, and the new evidence was devastating. Someone had provided the district attorney's office with detailed photos and recordings from a night Tyler was abandoned, including audio of Brooke telling Tyler that her boyfriend was more important than he was. "Where did these come from?" Harrison asked, reviewing the evidence. "Anonymous tip," Detective Walsh said. "Someone mailed us a package with photos, audio recordings, and detailed documentation of the entire incident. Very thorough, very professional." Brooke was officially charged with felony child endangerment. Harrison negotiated a plea deal, 5 years probation and mandatory counseling in exchange for a guilty plea. It was the best deal she was going to get, and everyone knew it. But Victor wasn't finished. On Thursday, Brooke received another call. This one was from a woman named Patricia Morrison. "I understand you knew my late husband, Brett Morrison," the woman said, her voice cold and controlled. "I think we need to have a conversation." They met at a coffee shop downtown. Patricia Morrison was everything Brooke had never been: elegant, educated, and carrying herself with the confidence that came from real wealth and social position. She was also furious. "You destroyed my family," Patricia said without preamble. "My husband left me and our children to run away with you. When he died in that car accident, I learned about the money he'd stolen from our accounts, the lies he'd told, the life he'd built with you while we were waiting for him to come home. I didn't know he was married at first," Brooke protested. "When I found out, I tried to leave, but he wouldn't let me. Spare me." Patricia's voice was sharp as broken glass. "I know exactly what kind of woman you are. The kind who destroys families and then plays the victim when consequences catch up with you." Patricia slid a manila envelope across the table. "Brett kept a journal. Did you know that? Detailed records of your entire relationship, including the night you abandoned your son in the mountains because he was cramping your style with my husband." Brooke opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were photocopies of Brett's handwriting, describing in detail their relationship, their plans, and his growing disgust with Brooke's willingness to abandon her child. "He wrote that you suggested leaving Tyler at a gas station," Patricia continued. "He wrote that you said an 8-year-old was too much work for the lifestyle you wanted to live. He wrote that you were the one who chose the mountains because you thought it would take longer for anyone to find him." The journal entries were brutal, painting Brooke as the primary architect of Tyler's abandonment. Whether they were real or fabricated didn't matter. They felt real, and they provided a narrative that made Brooke the villain of her own story. "What do you want?" Brooke whispered. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences," Patricia said. "I want you to know that there are people in this world who remember what you've done, and we don't forgive." As Patricia walked away, Brooke realized that her past was never going to stay buried. Every time she tried to move forward, someone would be there to remind her of what she'd done to Tyler. What she didn't realize was that Patricia Morrison was an actress Victor had hired, and Brett's journal was a masterpiece of creative writing designed to destroy what little self-justification Brooke had left. By Friday of the second week, Brooke was broken. The criminal charges, the failed psychological evaluation, Tyler's cold rejection, and the confrontation with Patricia Morrison had shattered any hope she'd had of rebuilding her life or her relationship with her son. She called Victor, sobbing. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I want to take the money and leave. I want to sign whatever papers you need me to sign." "Are you sure?" Victor's voice was gentle, concerned. "Once you sign those papers, there's no going back. You'll have no legal claim to Tyler ever again." "I'm sure. I can't be what he needs. I can see that now." The signing ceremony was held at Harrison Wells' law office. Brooke arrived looking like she hadn't slept in days, which was probably true. Tyler was there, along with Victor and a notary public. The documents were comprehensive: a complete termination of parental rights, a restraining order preventing Brooke from contacting Tyler until he was 25, and a confidentiality agreement that prevented her from selling her story to tabloids or writing a book about her experiences. "Before you sign," Victor said, "I want to make sure you understand exactly what you're agreeing to. You will have no legal relationship with Tyler. You cannot contact him, cannot show up at his school or workplace, cannot reach out through social media or third parties. If you violate any of these terms, you forfeit the money and face immediate criminal prosecution." Brooke nodded, her hand shaking as she reached for the pen. "There's one more thing," Tyler said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken since arriving. "I want you to know that I remember everything. I remember being 8 years old and begging you not to leave me. I remember you telling me that Brett was more important than I was. I remember sitting in those woods, freezing and scared, wondering why my own mother didn't love me enough to keep me safe." Brooke was crying openly now, but Tyler's voice remained steady. "I also want you to know that I turned out fine anyway. I have a father who would die before he'd let anyone hurt me. I have friends and grades and a future that doesn't include you at all. You didn't break me when you left me in those mountains. You just showed me exactly who you are. Tyler stood up and looked down at his biological mother. "Sign the papers. Take the money. And disappear. It's the only useful thing you've ever done for me." Brooke signed every document through her tears. When the notary finished, Victor handed her a cashier's check for $50,000. "Your motel is paid through Sunday," he said. "I'd suggest you be gone by then." As Brooke stumbled out of the law office, clutching the check that represented her final connection to Tyler, Victor felt a deep satisfaction. But he wasn't done yet. The final phase of his revenge was just beginning. Brooke left town that Saturday, driving her old Honda toward a future that Victor had carefully arranged. The $50,000 came with invisible strings. It was deposited into an account that Victor monitored, ensuring that every purchase, every transaction, every financial decision Brooke made would be tracked and recorded. Within 6 months, she'd blown through half the money on a luxury apartment and designer clothes, trying to recapture the lifestyle she'd once believed she deserved. Within a year, she was working as a waitress in Phoenix, struggling to make rent on a studio apartment. Victor received monthly reports on her activities. She tried dating, but every relationship ended badly when her past inevitably surfaced. She tried therapy, but couldn't afford to continue treatment. She tried multiple jobs, but her criminal record and psychological evaluation made finding stable employment nearly impossible. The beautiful irony was that Brooke's own choices continued to destroy her life. Victor didn't need to actively sabotage her. He'd simply created a situation where her own personality flaws and poor judgment would do the work for him. Meanwhile, Tyler thrived at Stanford. He majored in criminal justice as planned, graduated summa cum laude, and was accepted into law school with the stated goal of becoming a prosecutor. He never mentioned Brooke, never asked about her, never showed any interest in whether she was alive or dead. Victor couldn't have been prouder. 5 years after Brooke signed away her parental rights, Tyler called his father with news. "Dad, Emma and I are engaged." Victor smiled. Emma Rodriguez, the federal judge's daughter who had captured Tyler's heart in high school, was everything Victor could have hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Brilliant, principled, and from a family that understood the value of loyalty and justice. "When's the wedding?" "Next spring." "But Dad, there's something I want to talk to you about." When Tyler came home for Christmas, he brought up the subject that Victor had been waiting for. "I know what you did," Tyler said quietly as they sat in Victor's study, sharing a drink after dinner. "With her, the psychological evaluation, the fake journal entries, the actress you hired to play Brett's wife. I figured it out years ago." Victor studied his son's face, looking for judgment or disapproval. Instead, he saw understanding and something that might have been approval. "Are you upset?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "She abandoned me in the mountains to freeze to death because her boyfriend didn't want me around. She came back 10 years later because she needed money, not because she missed me or loved me. You gave her exactly what she deserved, a taste of her own medicine. And you're okay with that? Dad, you taught me that actions have consequences. You taught me that loyalty matters and that people who betray the ones who trust them should pay for those choices." Tyler raised his glass. "You also taught me that sometimes justice has to be personal because the system doesn't always work." Victor raised his own glass, feeling a deep satisfaction that went beyond revenge. He not only protected his son from a woman who would have continued to damage him, he'd raised Tyler to understand the difference between justice and mercy and when each was appropriate. 3 years later, as Victor walked Tyler down the aisle at his wedding, he reflected on the choices that had brought them to this moment. Brooke was still alive, still struggling, still paying for her decisions in small ways every day. She would never know what real happiness looked like, because she'd proven herself incapable of the loyalty and sacrifice that true relationships required. Tyler, meanwhile, had everything: a brilliant career as a prosecutor, a beautiful wife who adored him, and the knowledge that his father would never let anyone hurt him without facing consequences. As Tyler kissed his bride, Victor thought about the son who might have been damaged, broken, always wondering why his mother hadn't loved him enough to keep him safe. Instead, he'd raised a son who understood that love meant protection, that family meant loyalty, and that some betrayals could never be forgiven. Brooke had made her choice in those mountains 10 years ago. She'd chosen temporary pleasure over permanent responsibility, her own desires over her child's safety, betrayal over loyalty. Victor had simply made sure she lived with the consequences of that choice for the rest of her life. And as he watched Tyler begin his own family, Victor knew that the Brennan legacy, built on loyalty, strength, and the absolute certainty that betrayal would not be tolerated, would continue for generations to come. The son she'd abandoned had become everything she could never be: strong, loyal, and unforgiving of those who hurt the people they were supposed to protect. It was, Victor thought, the perfect revenge. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.